Okay, in this video, it's a short video, we're going to learn how to convert from one data type to another quite quickly and efficiently. So I've set up a little program here. It's going to ask the user to enter two numbers. Oop, that should be num2 and that should be b. Okay, so they're asking for num1, and then I'm going to store that integer into a. So I have a variable behind the scenes called a, and it's going to be storing whatever the user puts in. And then I'm going to ask for a second number, and I'm going to store that into b. Okay, and then just quickly I'm going to print a divided by b. Okay, so we should be cautious about division, and you should know by now if you have an int divided by an int, which we do, then it's going to cut off the decimal. So just to remind you, if I run this, I can put, let's say, 3 and 4. Okay, so in math class, 3 divided by 4 is 0.75, but in Java, it just gives me 0. It cuts off the decimal. I'm just going to change this to print and print. I think that looks better. Okay. So now, how do I keep the decimal? Well, there's a couple things you can do here, and what I've seen some of you doing in class is changing this to a double and a double, and then you would have to change this to next double, next double. So that actually works if I run this and put in 3 and 4. It keeps the decimal, great. But you have used up a bit more space in RAM because these variables are twice as big as int variables. And although we have lots of RAM on our computers, you may be asked one day to write a computer program for a really small device, like a watch or something. So we may be asked to keep these as int variables just to save space in RAM. So another option, and I've seen some people do this, is to just multiply by 1.0. So multiply a by 1.0 and then divide by b. And then in this case, you have a double value divided by an int, and then it will keep the decimal. So that also works. But there's another option, and this is fine. You can do it this way, but I just want to let you know of another way of doing it. And it's something called casting. And basically what you do is right before a variable, you put the data type that you want to convert to, and then you put that in parentheses. So I need an extra set around the word double. Okay, and what this does is it will take this variable, and it's called casting. It will cast it to a double. So a is an int in RAM, but this will just temporarily treat this as a double just for this step, just for this line of code. It just treats this as a double. Now, what does that mean? It means it just adds 0.0 to the end of this int. Okay, it's the same thing as multiplying by 1.0. It's just another way of doing it. So this does not change a. It's still an int. Okay, it's still an int. But when you put the word double at the front, it just temporarily puts a 0.0 at the end of it just for this calculation. Okay, so if I were to run this, you would see that it works. Okay, because the integer a is temporarily treated as a double. All right, so that's one form of casting. So this is casting from an int to a double. All right. And there's another form of casting, and that's casting from a double to an int. Okay, and this is actually a little more necessary than the previous casting that we looked at. So, for instance, if I have, let's just make another variable called c, and if I put in, let's say, 7, okay, no problem, no syntax errors. But if I made that 7.8, then this is going to crash. It's going to give me a syntax error, and it says possible lossy conversion from double to int. So it's basically saying, hey, you can't put a double into an int variable. Okay, but what we can do is we can cast this to an int. So before this data value, just put the word int in parentheses. And what this does is it trims off the decimal. So it will throw away the decimal, and it will just take the integer part and put it into here. All right. So if I printed C, okay, and then run it, just look at the last line of code here. So it says 7. So it cut off the decimal and put 7 into this variable, and then we're printing that, which is 7. So this is kind of a sneaky way. If you want to put double values into int variables, you can cast them to ints, but it cuts off the decimal place. So you got to be careful with that. You might be wondering, when would I ever use this? We're actually going to see it quite soon when we discuss random numbers in a future lesson. So once again, this just temporarily treats this value as an int. So if I had, let's say I made a double variable called x, and this was 7.8, and instead of this, let's say I put x here. So I'm just showing what if I used a variable here. This casting does not convert this to an integer in RAM. It's still a double variable, but what it does is it just trims away the decimal just for this line of code. It's just a quick temporary conversion just so I can put that value into the int variable. Okay, we'll practice this, and we'll see some examples of casting in actual programs a little bit later. Okay, thanks for watching.